Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Today, Jez Franklin with me from Swinburne. Coffee in hand. We're going to talk about learning transformations today and the recipes for that. We talked about some banana bread in the title, so we've come appropriately caffeinated. So we'll see how that goes. It's not a bad coffee either, Jez.
Exactly.
We've got quite a good session. We'll go for about 30 minutes today. We're going to focus on a learning transformation project that Jez has been leading over at Swinburne. We really want this to be a high value session for you. There'll be some takeaways that actually help you in your thinking.
Yep.
Jez is full of bright ideas. If we didn't have the lights here, I'm sure just the brilliance of his project management work would light the room. So we'll launch into it. Jez, you've just come out of a large learning project. You've previously done work at NAB, Census.
Yes.
So project management is something that you do in your sleep. But this particular project impacted about 2,300 staff and 58,000 plus students.
That's correct.
Could you give some context to it and just?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Morning, Tony. It's great to be here, and thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah.
So, yes, I'm currently running a large piece of work for Swinburne. We're doing Swinburne's in the middle of a large transformation. Basically, a number of phases. The first part is transitioning all of its content across to a new learning management system. So we're going from Blackboard to Canvas. As Tony says, that's affecting a lot of students and a lot of conveners and teachers as well. So that's gone really, really well. We've completed that 3 months ahead of schedule, which is fantastic.
Sorry, say that again.
We completed 3 months ahead of schedule.
Oh, okay.
So
Good.
and that's down to it's truly a team effort. It's down to the academic staff at Swinburne who've been fantastic. There's been a lot of effort from the team. We had a fairly large team of young people from all walks of life helping us do all of that transition work, and we did a full end-to-end transition with a lot of stakeholder engagement. So working with the conveners, moving content across, cleaning up content to make sure that the 36 or 33,715 units that went across were in really, really good shape. So
it's not a trivial exercise.
No.
What was the notional time frame for that on the project plan?
Well, they needed to be ready for semester 2, and they are ready. We were due to finish around December this year. We actually finished October the 12th. So.
And when did that body of work start?
So that started back in the overall program itself started in May 2017, where Duncan Bentley, the DVC academic, went to council to seek funding, knowing that they needed to do this large piece of work. So effectively, the transition team were running for about 12 months. Obviously, it was a slow start as we started to define process, get people on the ground, define the process, get the right people in. And go from there. So that's the first stage. The second stage is a transformation phase, which we've spent the past few months doing a lot of design work on. That's going well. There's a lot of work still to be done.
Oh, excellent. No, thank you. We're going to step through the process today. Cheekily, I've used the analogy of making some banana bread.
Absolutely.
Who doesn't love banana bread? So we're going to talk about the recipe. We're going to talk about the key ingredients. What's the mix of those ingredients? And we think about ingredients, I guess, in 3 areas. It's the processes, it's the people, and it's the frameworks around which you build your project out. And then we'll hopefully finish off with, I'm just trying to look at my notes here, a bit of a taste test, and just give people a sense of what they can be looking at in terms of red flags, warning signs.
Sure.
Typically in projects, it's difficult to get people to focus around and identify and agree on what those warning signs are, because it's different for each stakeholder group.
Yes.
But what do they actually mean in terms of impacting the deliverables? So so hopefully we get to a point where we don't have milestones that turn into tombstones. So yes.
And it's an interesting piece, and probably one of the first things I'd say, Tony, is delivery of pieces of work come down to the people. But what I'll spend a couple of minutes maybe talking about the need and creating that sort of sense of urgency, because the tertiary sector, as a lot of our audience will know, is going through an increased range of challenges right now. There's increased competition from overseas. There's a lot of tier 2 and tier 3 training organizations that are coming into the market that are seeing a lot of the sector as opportunities. So there's an increasing pressure. Also, the world of work is changing significantly. So to give you an example, I think it's the Foundation for Young Australians have talked about people that leave school and university, will have 17 jobs over 5 careers. That's very challenging. That's very challenging, especially for people to wrap their heads around who've had long tenure in employment. I've spent a lot of time working for a lot of different companies, both in this country and in North America and the UK, delivering pieces of work. So I've moved from different employers every 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So I've actually lived through a lot of that, and the fear that goes with moving from one piece of work to another, and all the rest of it. But so really the need there is there for universities to understand some of the challenges, what's going on. I think the other piece as well is that the new reality, again from the FYA report, is that it's taking on average about 2.5 years for a full-time graduate to move from education into work. So that's a significant amount of time.
That also becomes, I guess, a performance indicator for universities too. Yeah. What was the gap between leaving and entering? And it's something that universities are going to be more and more tied to. Yes. That changing of performance expectations that will be set by policy government is really going to impact us.
Yes. Yeah. And that brings up, that's a key measure. A lot of universities are doing transformation now to talk about employability, business creation. It's definitely 2 key parts of the framework that Swinburne are using. And it's important to therefore turn around and say, okay, what do those jobs of the future look like? What do students in the tertiary sector need to be being taught to be successful in that? And the FYA report, as well as a number of others, are saying, Ernst & Young have produced a report recently, universities in 2030, that universities really need to think hard about what they're here to do, across the spectrum of what they're good at, what they're not so good at, play to their strengths, and potentially look to change their offerings to really reflect what the workforce of the future really needs and therefore works for students.
So Jez, if we're going to kind of dive into the recipe a little bit, we talked about business cases. Yes, and that's kind of where this started over a coffee a few weeks ago. And there was a point at which I had to actually go in a couple of years ago and retrofit a business case to a large piece of work. And it was very difficult because so many of the pieces that we tried to pull together in terms of procurement policy, business outcomes, budget, none of them were aligned. No one had the right sorts of conversations. There were certainly processes in place to pull that together. So trying to weave it together after the fact was very difficult. So from a business case perspective, what are those key imperatives that need to be properly agreed up front and in place?
Yeah. So very good question, Tony. Business cases, it's a commercial construct. I know that's can be an interesting question sometimes in the education sector, but ultimately you're asking an organization to commit a significant amount of resources, people, dollars to an outcome over a significant period of time. So it's very important. It's like the foundations of a house. You wouldn't try and build a house if you didn't have a solid foundation, a solid slab to work from. So business cases, it's very much around having that good commercial position. What's the revenue, what's the benefit profiles, making sure that that's all locked in, people have signed up to it and agreed. And then, being able to use that as a key plank of, getting that resource available. So clear, solid benefits.
So just on that, do you think by going through this process effectively, especially the financial component, it's easy to mount the case and give some confidence around what the budget truly looks like? Because quite often when we set budgets, there's a sticker shock component when it originally finally goes across the desk. So that's a key problem to kind of overcome.
It is. As part of that business case piece, it is very important that all stakeholders are briefed prior to when you sit down all around the table and go and say, here's the case.
So this shouldn't be a surprise.
Shouldn't be a surprise. No, it's all about communication. Having that very clear model, having people signed up to it, obviously, as a sponsor for a business case, they're ultimately accountable for the outcome. So ensuring that that's in place, getting that organizational and executive support is absolutely key all the way across the organization, from the top of the organization right through. And that's especially important when it comes to transformations that are not easy. They're hard when you're talking about organizational change that affects hundreds and thousands of people. It needs that support. It needs the executive team and the leadership to really own that, to be bought into it and sort of drive through on it. To give you an example, just on that particular point, Ian Jacobs up at UNSW is pretty much any time he's speaking in a public forum, 50% of the message will be about the transformation. So UNSW are doing a large transformation, 165 projects. $3 billion worth of investment over between 2050 and 2025. So it just goes to show that, if you've really got to have that sort of solid benefits case, you've got to know what your costs are. And then you've really got to lead it from the top. Just on the cost piece, one of the other key things is that I have come across in my time delivering large pieces of work, is making sure that the people that are going to do the work do the estimates, that you get them bought in, you get them owning it, you get them owning the outcomes. I've seen a number of management teams through my career who basically turn around, put a number in a box, and then turn around and be surprised when that number is not correct.
Well, if the people who are delivering it aren't involved, how robust and how tested can it actually be? It's just something we've plucked out of the air, and I'm sure very few of us have ever seen that happen in the project.
Yes. I mean, we've used the analogy banana bread. For me, I do like to cook. Banana bread is a particular favourite. But as a delivery guy, it's about the ingredients. It's about the mix, and there are some fundamentals around the team, the structure of the team that you're bringing. Get the best people you can. Give them a very clear view of what you need. Get out of the way. Let them get on with it. And as a management executive, you're there to clear the roadblocks. Make sure commercially and from a communication standpoint that everybody's up to date what's going on, and you can get on and get some great things done.
So probably a nice little segue then just to those three ingredients around the frameworks, process and people. And there may be a couple of others that you've thought about, a bit of seasoning, I don't know. In terms of frameworks and processes, maybe we start there.
Yeah, so I mean that's an interesting point, because there's a number of different approaches you can use for delivering pieces of work. But again, it comes down to the fundamentals of the team. Estimate, size it, include some contingency, because things, especially when you're talking multi-year pieces of work, things will go awry. So it's very important to make sure that you've got those elements in place. Getting those ingredients together with the right people, with the right commercial model. And then estimating the work and then getting on and doing it. From a delivery standpoint, there's a number of elements there. Obviously, from a methodology perspective, from a delivery perspective, Agile is on everybody's lips at the moment. There's a lot of work going on in that space, but again, it's cutting the cloth to fit, finding the outcome that you want to achieve and working the best way to achieve that outcome.
I agree. Agile almost becomes we talk about Agile projects, but quite often, as we're trying to report upwards and take people through that process and understanding what Agile truly means and the way in which the reporting comes back and the productizing of components, that's very difficult for people who don't have experience or understanding of those sorts of approaches. So how do we help our leadership and those in the broader project, maybe, broader stakeholders, understand what an Agile project, for instance, will actually look like and how it will deliver for them?
Sure. There's various ways that you can do that. You can get them into an Agile mindset. You can get them into the actual process by operating your meetings in an Agile fashion with stand-ups and that sort of thing.
Have some of those broader stakeholders come into the stand-ups and get a sense and a smell.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen some organisations use the communication methods of Agile just within their business, not from delivering technology pieces of work. The simple fact of getting teams together for half an hour at 9:30 in the morning to stand in front of a wall full of Post-it notes to actually articulate what they're working on, what's blocked, where they need assistance, and just that again, it comes down to communication. Just that aspect of getting people together, first thing in the morning, what's working, what's blocked, what do you need help with, can pay dividends. When you get to delivering certain elements, if you're delivering a lot of web-based, mobile, UI, user interface work, then Agile plays, personally plays a very is a very good approach to take. I'm working on core transformations for banks. I wouldn't necessarily go down some of the Agile approaches for that, because again, it's about cutting the cloth to fit, as I said.
Yeah. So we've had a look at the recipe. We've had a look at the ingredients. So now we're going to start mixing in the bowl. Yep. And one of the key components here is getting the right mix of people, resources, and the way in which they work through that process, that project. You set up front, it's important to have a seasoned project manager leading these initiatives. And you're right. At one point, probably 18 months ago, everybody who was coming into some sort of vocational training was offered a project management course, and that's going to be the area in which you're going to get a job. Well, no, that's not the case. These are large, high-risk, high-stakes initiatives, and you have to have strong, considered, calm leadership at the top.
I would actually go broader than that, Tony. It comes back to the comment I made earlier on about the teams and the quality of the team members that you've got working on the initiative. Large transformations especially, it's about the team. The biggest asset, the greatest asset that an organization has is the people that work for it. It's therefore about whether they're technical guys, business guys, change people, even sponsors as well. It's about getting those right people into the right roles. The project manager is just a guy there to clear the roadblocks, help get things delivered.
Whisk in hand,
absolutely, or a big industrial mixer, depending on how much you're baking. But the important thing there is it's about the quality of the people on the piece of work. So that's the recipe for success. So 50% of the battle in that delivery is getting the absolute best people to work on it, and that's from a business side and from a technology side, and especially in the tertiary sector. Key piece here is about full-time co-located teams. I've seen some clients where they struggle to get enough availability to actually work on pieces of work. That's a classic indicator sign of where things may not be going quite as smoothly. But so really, all the way from sponsor through the management team through to the teams doing the work, having those people on board. And there's an adage in technology companies in the US where they say hire slowly, fire fast, which is effectively, and again comes to some of the key indicators piece that we'll get onto in a moment, but getting the best people on that you can, give them a clear indication of what you need to do, get out of the way, let them get on with it. The other piece as well that I will say, it's also about having fun. If you get a high performing team, and I'm a big fan of building high performing teams, it's really getting, having some fun along the way. 90,360 is the magic number, and that's the number of hours that you will spend at work in your working lifetime. So guess what? That's a pretty big number. So
it's scary.
It's pretty scary. So you might as well enjoy it. So for me, it's about building, really building a great team, getting and delivering outcomes for organisations.
There's a term you used in the middle there of your last piece there about co-location. It made me think: are there particular structures that you would look at and say, as we move into those, checking the oven, what are those success and red flags, those warning signs? Would you think if a project wasn't significantly structured physically in the right way, that's a very obvious red flag?
It's something to look at, but we live in a globally connected world now. Having worked on pieces of work where development teams are in different countries, different time zones, different continents, you're never necessarily going to get everybody in the same place. But entering into a large piece of work, one of the key pieces, and again, it comes down to the communication piece, and the collaboration piece. If you can set that up, and it's possible to do so because teams are located in the same area, then it is a strong. For me, it's a key ingredient. It's a strong indicator of success.
So how do you build that sense of team, of shared success, celebrating those successes with remote teams?
So cycle them through from off-site to on-site, bring them together if at all possible, embed them, some of the offshore teams and key team members, cycle them through onshore, regular, face-to-face conversations. I mean, the fact that we're talking with you guys today live, there are some fantastic tool sets out there now that allow you to work collaboratively and effectively over distances. So distance is no longer a barrier. However, saying that, being able to walk up to somebody, especially if you're trying to solve a complex business or technical problem in front of a whiteboard, it's a lot easier if you've got people in the room as opposed to.
So if we were thinking about warning red flags, what would you see as the top 2 or 3 that we should be thinking about and looking for these fairly early or
Sure.
consistently through the project?
So assuming that there's a strong commercial base and you've got all that,
Yep.
You've got that strong foundation in place, then it's about the measurement for me. There's an old adage in management, which is if you cannot measure it, you cannot manage it. So depending on your framework, depending on the tools that you're going to use to actually deliver elements, you've got to be able to measure that velocity. Velocity is a term in Agile that, how much of the team, how much work of the team getting through.
Yep.
And it's really that
how many cards they're moving,
how many cards,
how they're moving through
story
blockages.
points.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yep.
So, you can measure it via, a project plan, you can measure it via points, things moving on a wall. But that gives everybody, and also from a governance standpoint, it allows you to therefore communicate through to your senior stakeholders on how things are going. That is a key flag. Not having those metrics in place is one of the key things I look for. So really, to answer your question, it's about strong commercial base, strong foundational base, having the right team in place, fully allocated to that, and then just measure on how it's going.
Yeah.
Then you can, as problems arise, because they invariably do, especially on large pieces of work, that's where you then draw down on any kind of contingency, or you flex your teams to deal with some of the issues as they arise. Yeah.
So it's not just a case of paying attention to the fact that our cards aren't moving and none of the hurdles are being resolved. It's about how you're communicating upline about these challenges, how you're now realigning resources or expectations with leadership to make sure that the project is understood, the challenges that inevitably come up are dealt with in a balanced manner, and the project continues forward.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Look, we've talked about checking the oven, and I've burned lots of things. So I guess the last piece is I guess the taste test, and you've been very strong on the people side.
Yep.
So if we're to be successful, what's your philosophy for managing people in those projects? You talked about success, and you talked about noting and celebrating success. There's also times though when things don't go well. How do you balance the two if we're going to hire slow and fire fast?
And people management, we've all been there. We're working with a lot of different teams, a lot of different individuals. Everybody's different. That's what can make it so much fun, but also challenging at the same time. But again, it's about the one thing I found with high performing teams, when you really take that people focus and you really take the time to hire well, what you find there is that with the right people will take on work. They will just get through it. Problems will get resolved. If you're then, as an organisation or as a team, getting out and having a beer after work, or just putting on a morning tea, really doing those things that will make the team more responsive, because they actually then get bought into the outcome. There's a Simon Sinek has a great piece on YouTube. Check it out. Talks about the why as to really getting people bought into what you're trying to do and the why. And there's a classic line in that particular video where he talks about when Martin Luther King stood up and said, "I have a dream." He didn't stand up and say, "I have a plan," because people were like, "Yeah." That wouldn't have resonated. But if you get people bought into the why as to why you're doing it, and that comes back to the business case piece that I mentioned earlier on, that strong senior stakeholder support all the way from the top down. You need that message of the why. You get the team bought into that why, and then you will find that those teams really rise to the challenge. They really will push through. They'll push through tough barriers that teams may not may not be able to get over.
So I agree with you. Fundamentally, people will go through anything if they understand the meaning and they sign up for the meaning of what's being done. So when the hard times hit, they will move forward. They'll do what they require. You talk about high performing teams. One of the great things about Agile is that it empowers each person to be responsible for and accountable to a whole variety of components.
Correct.
If you have the right people attached to the right meaning, then you're going to have a successful project.
Yes. It is more than the people, as well as the process, the technology, wrapping it up, getting the right people in there with the experience who've done it before. So, that's across the piece. And, I've been delivering large pieces of work across a lot of different sectors for 20 years. And really, I place that people side. And in the US, they do this very well with that people management and performance management piece. And I think that there's a lot that in Australia we could take from that, and there's a lot of learnings from that. But really, if you get that right, come back to the banana bread analogy. If you get the ingredients right, and you're mixing it well and you're checking it, then you can get some pretty nice cake coming out.
Just thank you for all of your time this morning. Really appreciate it. He did all that for a coffee, so I think you've done well.
Yeah.
If you want to connect with Jez, go and check him out on LinkedIn. He has been doing a lot of really high quality work for quite a while. The story around Swinburne is a fantastic one.
Yes.
But it's very pertinent when we think about all the changes that are happening with Adelaide's just gone through some changes.
Correct.
Probably I'm aware of 8 universities looking at currently major pieces of work around this. So this is only going to accelerate and broaden. So thank you everybody for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.
Cheerio.